Here we go with the final debrief for England at Euro 2024. Somehow they made it to the final. Who knows how? But they made it to the final. They lost the final, and they deserved to lose the final. The best team won, so congratulations to Spain. But let's dissect it all, because it's worthy of dissection. How could we get that far and not capitalise on it? What went wrong for England in the finalists? The debrief. I'm Adrian Durham. Jim Proudfoot, our commentator, to my right, your left, and to my left, your right, it's Stuart Pearce. I don't know how I'm laughing about it, Stuart. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. But England, well, they deserved to lose, didn't they? Spain were the best side, we have to say that.
Well, listen, 7 victories in a row for Spain. You've got to take your hat off to them. They were by far the best team from start to finish in this tournament, and credit to them. They've come across the tough side of the draw, let's say. They've knocked over some really good teams en route, and probably they beat better teams in the group than they did maybe in the final. So that was how it panned out. The story from England: 8 goals in 7 games. We thought we had a luxury of attacking flair. We got 8 goals, just over a goal a game. Not good enough, really. And I always felt, and was quite vocal about, we should have made changes in that third group game when we had the opportunity. We were already through in the group, and I think maybe 1 or 2 changes then to give 1 or 2 options the option to really stake a claim in the first team. We didn't do that. And listen, at the end of the day, we've got to another final, which is fantastic, and I'm very proud that we've got this far in the tournament. Maybe the side of the draw and a bit of luck and the group and all of those type of things. 2 victories in 7 games probably tells its own story.
Yeah, not good enough in the end, and Spain were definitely good enough. But with the players that England have got, Jim Proudfoot, there's a lot of goals at club level in that team, but it didn't translate. Can we work out why not?
No, I can't begin to work out why not. You got Harry Kane, wasn't fit. I don't think he was fit. He was carrying an injury or whatever. He scored 44 goals for Bayern over the course of the season. He didn't look like a 44-goal marksman, with absolutely no disrespect to him whatsoever, but he looked as though he was labouring and playing through the pain barrier at times. I think he gave his best performance against the Dutch, but I would think that if he's being honest, he would feel that he was subpar in every other game that he played. Phil Foden's got 18 goals for Manchester City since the turn of the year, and we didn't ever find a way to bring the best out of Phil. Jude Bellingham, more than 20 goals for Real Madrid this season, similarly had one exceptional moment that we will never forget, and a great header in the first game. But we never found a way to harness the attacking resources that we had. Now, whether that was not down to them, whether that was down to the way that England were building up, very slow and laborious in possession, there was no real dynamism. I think that will be a part of it. And I think that workload over a very long season, with the number of games that they play and the high intensity and the high profile of so many fixtures that so many of the England players play, I think definitely will have played a part in it. But when it comes down to it, England have played 7 games, 2 of which have gone to extra time. So that's 690 minutes of football. And to have an XG of 6.5 over 690 minutes of football is so far below where it should be, it's frightening.
And that XG was lower than Croatia's XG, and they went out in the group stage, and that kind of tells its own story. We were second best. England was second best, Stuart, on the night here in Berlin tonight, but we probably weren't the second best team in the tournament, were we?
No, that would be fair to say. I mean, the fact that we got to the final was one thing. The fact that I think there were other teams that probably played better on the journey, that went out a lot earlier, maybe on the north side of the draw. But that was the nature of it. The other side of that is when we get an equaliser, all of a sudden you think to yourself, hang on a minute, we could be in it. And then all of a sudden within the game, I think our players thought this is going to extra time. Don't think the Spanish did. We opened the door, and if you look at Cucurella's run, surging run late on in the game, he's run 60 yards to get in front of Cole Walker and whip that ball across the face of the goal, where they were still chasing the game. We weren't.
Yeah, Cucurella had been booed by the England fans all night. Sweet for him to get the assist, and he celebrated wildly, and why wouldn't you as well? I think from my point of view, I'm looking at it and I wonder why Kane was on for 60 minutes. We played with 10 men for virtually 60 minutes. I'd also say that us sort of waiting for extra time was really weird. We had them on the ropes. I thought they were there for the taking. They were creaking. As soon as Cole Palmer came on, Watkins had caused them problems with his runs. Cole Palmer comes on, they couldn't handle him. We get back on level terms with a brilliant goal, and then it felt like we sat back and waited for extra time. I could not get my head around that at all. I'd love to know if that was the manager's instruction or whether the players took it on themselves to sit back. I can't believe the latter, but who knows, we may never know. But that for me, Jim, was a frustration that Cole Palmer came on, and Stuart said in commentary he's probably been our best player at the tournament. He hasn't even started a game. He's come on and they're all over the place, and yet we stop attacking at 1-1. It's frustrating me even now.
Yeah, it's like the self-belief had evaporated when it should have been quite the reverse, because England, when Cole Palmer had scored his goal, were playing their best football of the game. They'd had a little 5-minute spell in the first half without really creating too much, but they've been in and around the edge of the Spanish penalty area and hardly been in those positions for most of the game since. But then when the change was made and Cole Palmer came on, he scores within 2.5 minutes. He then had another fantastic through ball that was cut out. And at that stage, you can't say that Spain were buckling, but it looked as though if ever they were going to be there for the taking, that was the time that England had to press their advantage home. And England just ceded the initiative again, and that's the most frustrating thing for me, looking back at the two finals. I didn't feel as though England gave themselves a chance to win in 2021, really, with the way that they played, and they sat deeper and deeper and deeper, and we all know what happened with the Bonucci equaliser and so on and so forth. I didn't really feel as though England gave themselves a chance to win this one. And if they had won, I think they would have beaten the best side in the tournament. So I don't think there's any disgrace in a way in losing a final to Spain. But there are so many frustrations with the way that they have lost this final to Spain, because they didn't give themselves a chance to get over the line. They just took a step back. And maybe we're guilty of it as well. We've been saying, well, if the game goes to extra time, fancy England. If the game goes to penalties, definitely fancy England. Well, maybe that is the attitude that is permeating through the England dressing room, that they thought their best chance, the percentage football, their best chance was to keep things tight, get it to penalties, and they would win on penalties. But obviously it didn't happen. Yeah, it didn't happen,
and there's a frustration there as well that we've got these attacking players, which I mentioned earlier, and yet we sit back. It's a deep frustration. I don't know how to resolve it. I wonder what the players feel about it as well, Stuart, but we haven't scored enough goals. We haven't defended well enough. And Gareth said that he came into the tournament with a lot of defensive issues. He's been repeating that over and over again. Well, if you've got defensive issues, why don't you attack at the other end, play to your strengths, score more goals? Listen, you might have gone out in a blaze of glory, losing a game 4-3 in the quarterfinals, but at least it would have been entertaining. I can't really understand the game plan tonight at all, and there will be some heavy criticism, I think.
Yeah, I think it's been start and stop through most of the games on this journey that we've had. You know, there's been times where we got frustrated that we've not got forward enough, quickly enough. There's certainly been frustrations that we've not built up quickly enough from the back to get through the thirds. I haven't seen a dynamic counter-attack threat from us, you know, which I think, certainly going back a couple of years in memory, you know, when we have actually counter-attack teams, we've looked a real threat. Every time, my defining memory of this tournament, I think, is goalkeeper catches the ball and four players up front are going, calm down, slow down. You know, that's exactly what the opposition want. You know what I mean? They want you to slow down. You know, they've had their attack, now slow down while we get set. And yeah, too many frustrations within the ranks of what we've done. And when the dust settles on this, it'll be another final. We've been to another final, we love that, and it gives you a chance, a 50-50 chance at a trophy, but didn't do ourselves enough justice on the way to the final to get up enough rhythm, momentum, form, all of those type of things.
Yeah, you look at the 7 games. England have won 2 of those 7 games, one of them with a last-minute goal, and the other when they were hanging on really in that first game against Serbia, where again they didn't play particularly well. And you can take it further back. You can look at the 2 games that they played before the tournament in June, where they played against the Bosnians and beat them 3-0, but scored 2 in the last 5 minutes and the Bosnians were tiring. And they lost to Iceland. The 2 games in March, beaten by Brazil, were lacklustre. Needed a 5th-minute stoppage time equaliser to salvage a point at home to Belgium. Last game of last year, North Macedonia away, that we'd beaten 7-0 earlier in the campaign, drew 1-1. Okay, it was a dead rubber, but it was a really bang average performance. So unfortunately, that's 12 games in a row that England haven't played well in. 12 games, not just 3 or 4, that's 12 games in a row where you can look at half an hour here, half an hour there, and some really good, memorable, extraordinary moments. But as mentioned in commentary, it feels like the road to mediocrity was paved with gold. You had those classic moments we will never forget, but you're grabbing hold of that to remember the tournament. There are very few other positives.
Yeah, agreed on that. And I think that, listen, when we look back on Gareth Southgate's reign overall, from where we were when he took over in 2016, we just had a manager in for 1 game. And before that, we'd been humiliated by Iceland in 2016. Now, the humiliations at tournaments have stopped, and there's been loads of those along the way. We as England fans remember them only too well. So I think you have to step back and applaud exactly where he's taken us to from when he took over. I think that's an incredible thing for him to do. The way he's spoken, I think, in a lot of instances, difficult times for the country, for people in the country. He's spoken about things beyond football. We spoke before the game about how he's been the leader the country needed when they were leaderless and rudderless. And he actually took on that mantle. He's a football manager. So, yeah, you can argue with him picking the team and the tactics and all that, but he was a leader when we needed a leader in this country. So I really want to applaud him for that. But where do we go from here? Where does he go from here, Stuart Pearce? What do you think happens next?
Well, he's certainly got some thinking to do. There's no doubt about that. Whether he wants to carry on in the job, if you ask me, and you know, he's a friend of mine, but I would never ever ask him the question before. I think that will be his last game. I think he'll say thank you very much. I think he's done brilliant things for the Football Association. If it was me and I was at the Football Association and he made that judgment call, I would say to him, look, have you thought about staying on in a role that would be helping the new manager and working alongside John McDermott? That's I would do everything I could to keep him inside the organisation. He's got that much worth in my mind to the organisation. But if you ask me, do I think he'll be in post come September? I think the answer will be no.
When you talk about a role, what exactly are you talking about?
Head of teams, if you like. Overviewing all the teams from under 16s right the way through to the seniors and helping out with the seniors, not in a direct manner as such, but to help John McDermott, you know, in his role. I think there's value there for someone of his ilk.
I mean, the obvious question is, would the next England manager be okay with the previous England manager in that position?
Well, what you do is you put Gareth in post before you put the manager in post.
But could it put candidates off?
I wouldn't think so, because you're working with a man that's incredibly unselfish to the cause. He's proved that over an 8-year period, Adrian, you know what I mean? You talk about the greater good that he's done, you know what I mean? And the latter stage finishes and the players desperate for him to be the manager still, I think, you know what I mean? And all the players, and how he's overseen all that. For me, he's the best man for the job, and to have him leave the organisation in general wouldn't be the right thing to do. I think he'll step away from it. That will be my feeling. If he didn't, I'd be delighted for him to stay, but I think he will.
Well, I love him, and I'd love him to stay as well. But do we have to ask ourselves, Jim, could another manager get more out of these players?
Yeah, you've always got to ask yourself that, because you've always got to be looking when, he's 6 months away, 5 months away from the end of his contract. So you've always got to be looking for who is the right man to take England to the next World Cup. That's a very valid question, irrespective of what had happened in this tournament. You've always got to make sure that you've got the right person in situ. I don't think, and I know a lot of football fans won't agree with this, but I don't think it is absolutely as cut and dried as look at the XG over 7 games over the tournament is disappointing, therefore he's got to go. It's not that, it's everything else that he brings. We know how divided the England squad was and how many fissures there were in it at one stage, how desperate some of the performances were in the middle part of the last decade. And I think Gareth Southgate's legacy would be the unity and the enjoyment now that the England players have in representing their country, and he's restored the pride. And it's been a great ride. It hasn't produced silverware over the last 8 years, but it's been a great ride. They've qualified for back-to-back finals in this tournament, having never reached one. They've only ever reached one major tournament final in their history, which was before you and I were born. They had only won 6 knockout games in the 50 years leading up to Gareth's appointment. They've won 9 in his 8 years. You've got to remember what the starting point of this journey was. He's gone from embarrassed to Berlin. That's what he's achieved. But you've still got to look at, is he the right man for the job? And, as you said, it's a very pertinent question. Could a different manager play with a different style and bring more out of the players that he's got? I think that is always a place for Gareth Southgate. I'd like to have a job for life in the FA, in the role that Stu has identified, that he could oversee the younger age group teams, could bring success, and he could help mould the England stars of the future. I don't think it would get in the way of the next international manager at all. My gut feeling is that Gareth's walking back to Pavilion out for 102 here. I don't think he will be back for the next tournament cycle. I don't think he'll be involved for the Nations League, or might be involved for the Nations League to make sure that they appoint the right manager. But I think he would say, okay, I'm going to be stepping back after the Nations League campaign. So he might go on conceivably for the 6 games in the autumn until his contract runs out in the December, and then they appoint the new person. Got to get the appointment right, and you'd still have 18 months before the World Cup. He will be having people lambasting him without a shadow of a doubt. I think you've got to look at the bigger picture.
Let's end this by having a look at England's best player of the tournament, shall we? Stuart Pearce, first of all, who would you give it to?
Well, I think solely because the fact that Saka's played in tournaments before and he's got the experience, I will probably edge on Mark Gahey. I think it's his first tournament, never played in tournament football before. We went into this tournament scared stiff that we couldn't defend well enough to get through any of the games. We thought we could score goals, we didn't know we could defend. Maguire ended up either injured and left out, whatever it may be. Someone had to fill the void. Mark Gahey stepped in there, and I thought he's been outstanding, to be fair. I thought he had another solid game again tonight, and it'd probably be him I'd go for.
I'm going to go for someone that I wouldn't say was England's star man in any of the individual games, but I'm going to go for Cole Palmer. And that's a frustration that he hasn't started a game. And yet I think, in a way, every time he's come on, I think in 4 of the 5 games he was a massive influence. The one that he was the least influence in, arguably, was the semi-final against the Dutch, where he's played one sublime ball for Ollie Watkins' winner. So he's come up with an assist. It was a great goal tonight. I understand why he hasn't started the game, in a way, when you've got Foden and Bellingham there, and we've talked about the role of closers, to use baseball parlance, in football, and I think that's something that's going to be more prevalent in football going forward. And Cole maybe has been cast in that role, but he should have been getting a lot more minutes. If it hadn't been for extra time, we'd only have seen 70 minutes of football in this tournament. So when Gareth has brought him on, he's expected really that he's only going to see him for 70 minutes over 5 games. I think that's a shame, really. I'd like to have seen him start that 3rd game. And when you consider how few international miles he's got on the clock, and indeed the fact he'd only scored 5 senior goals in his career before the start of this domestic season, I think that he's really stepped up to the plate, and he's an international star, not just for the present, but absolutely for the future. He's one of those that they'll build the team around.
I thought Jordan Pickford made a couple of great saves tonight, but I would go Cole Palmer as well, actually. And it is really weird because he's just come on as a sub in the games that he's featured in. So it makes no sense, but Cole Palmer is my favourite for England player of the tournament. It's all meaningless anyway because England didn't win it. They didn't play well in the final. They deserved to lose and probably lucky to get to the final anyway. Could we kill them a bit more here? Actually, do you know what I blame? You two, I think, will agree with me here. I blame this tie. Do you want to just hold this mic for me, just for a second?
Are you going to rip it in half?
I'm not.
Can you burn it?
Let me explain what happened with the tie. I had this tie, an England tie. I threw it in my case as I packed, and I said I'm only going to wear it if they get to the final. Wore it, and what did it do? Did nothing. So
it's been holding your trousers up for 4 months.
Any wonder it's feeling the strain. There you go, you've had it. That's the end of the England debriefs. Thanks for watching. Sorry we couldn't bring you a trophy. We wanted it to be a happy one, didn't we? But it just wasn't to be. Stuart Pearce, Jim Proudfoot, me, Adrian Durham. We'll see you at the next tournament.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.